Very happy for y'all to be here. And we're finishing off April on the 30th right here before launching into May with Ian and writing magical duels. Romantic Tension with Daphne will be up next week as well. So we're always out here with awesome writerly things, lots of craft talks, and I real happy to have you here today. I with Ian, absolutely. Ian, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna cut in real quick just to let people know. I mean, if you're able to come this time, that's awesome. If for some reason you're interested but cannot make an event, we do have a repository on YouTube already underneath Tomeworks. But if you are interested in seeing what other events we have or watching the edited versions of these live events, you can find that on Substack under Tomeworks' The Forge newsletter. And I will put that in the comments and in the show notes when we spread this out. So I apologize, Ian. Please go forth and battle.
All right. So, hey, everybody. My name's Ian. Happy to be back. It's been a little bit, but I'm an editor at Tomeworks. I do lots of fantasy, sci-fi, and horror writing. I'm known for a superhero web serial called Inheritors, which is a top 50 of all time on top web fiction, which is now known as the Mega Jewel series. I am an editor with Homeworks, as I've already said. I do a lot of D&D, and I have in the past practiced Muay Thai, so I have a little bit of experience with fighting and being in the thick of it. Um, but today, so I want to talk to y'all about today is magical combat, but this is kind of going to be a bit of a rehash of an old talk I gave about 2-ish years ago, which was also about combat. That one will have some of the same material, but I've also included a little bit extra, specifically revolving around the use of magic in duels. But just to kind of go over again what I feel makes writing combat or what makes a good fight scene, for me, it is more than just the choreography, realism, powers, talent, gear, whatever. Uh, those things to me are just the aesthetics of a fight. But unlike our last fighting presentation, we will be taking into some of these things into consideration because we're going to be focusing on the aesthetics and logic of magic, which dictate a little bit differently than say a sword fight or a gun fight or anything like that. Oh, and I've included, of course, my favorite magical duel of all time, which is Gandalf versus Saruman, where they just kind of scream at each other and throw each other around with telekinetics and hit each other with their staves. And if you ever played D&D and played a wizard, you know that that is actually pretty accurate. Once you run out of spells, you tend to devolve into just your regular little smacking them with a quarterstaff or something. But anyway, uh, so for me, what I've included is a good fight scene has cheese. Cheese being characters, environment, emotions, stakes, and economics. But beyond that, a good magic fight scene respects logic. Uh, I've pulled in today Sanderson's Laws of Magic, 'cause I know people have various opinions about Sanderson's writing and books and whatnot. But in terms of, putting a magic system on a page and coming up with very clear, defined rules, Brandon Sanderson's kind of the guy. And because of that, his rules apply really well to combat. His first law is that, and this is probably the best one, an author's ability to solve conflict with magic is directly proportional to how well the reader understands said magic. The second law can be written very simply. It goes, limitations are better than powers. And the third law is expand what you already have before you add something new to your magic system. So those are our three kind of guiding principles when we're doing, and this of course does lean more on the hard magic system side of things, but if you're writing a soft magic system, I think some of these things can still apply. Um, so, but I'm going to dive a little bit into what each of these rules means. So in terms of a fight scene, your first law, the ability to solve conflict, which is directly applicable to what we're talking about, it is directly proportional to how well the reader understands said magic. So you need to, when you're going into writing a magical fight scene, you need to pretty strongly have established in the reader's mind the rules of the magic system. They need to know if spells cost anything, if what the range of these things are. They need to know some of the nitty gritty that you may not be as interested in writing at if you are going to do it for combat. Specifically because you can't suddenly change these rules on them. You can't say, oh, a wizard can only cast a spell as far as he can see, and then suddenly have them casting spells that go beyond sight. Or you can't say a wizard can freely cast a meteor shower without, spending anything. When you've explicitly stated a cost to magic like mana or life energy or whatever, or even if they have to like gather like specific materials, if you suddenly say no, they don't have to do that, then you've lost your reader's trust. And that goes beyond just the magic system or beyond just combat, but you cannot solve conflict in combat without a very solid understanding of what the rules are. Likewise, you also need to establish pretty strong consequences for magic using them. Fireballs can set things on fire, cold spells freeze water, etc. You want to think about the practical material applications of what using magic in combat looks like and the effect it has on the environment, which ties into a later slide. You also want to establish strength of magic ahead of a fight. You want to make sure that the combatant's skill is clear, so you know the direction the fight will head. Robert Jordan, the writer of The Wheel of Time, famously had a huge list of various characters' power level, basically. Um, and that is what he always used when he had characters go up against each other, just to make sure it didn't. Now, the power and strength did not necessarily translate to victory in said fights, but they did help him kind of like get an image of how the fight would go. And I mean, we've all seen things like, Dragon Ball Z, where they have the little scouter on that goes power levels over 9,000. That kind of stuff. Even if it's just offhand and stupid and little quibble, like cute little statement, it does help you get an idea of they view this guy as a threat. You know that this fight is not going to be, they're just going to womp him or whatever. There will be a serious battle here. So it's these kinds of statements that help you write your combat scenes in a way that the reader feels is satisfying. Otherwise, you're looking at things like Deus Ex Machina. You're pulling things out of your butt just to finish a fight for a protagonist, and you're not really letting the characters dictate the story. You're letting plot that you've set out ahead of time dictate the story. If you're not doing these like basic steps of setting up the system's rules. I'm gonna let that sit for a second. Also, apologies, guys, if my voice sounds a little out of it. I had I'm a little under the weather on the grumbliness, so if I have to stop and cough my lungs out, don't worry about it. All right, so Sanderson's second law it goes limitations are greater than powers. Magic systems have a lot of creative options when it comes to fighting, more so than like regular combat, because you can only write how somebody punches somebody or swings a sword so many times, but you can come up with an infinite number of spells to put into a magic system. However, you do need limits are what makes that kind of interesting rather than, like just being able to do whatever. Magic, let's say Avatar is a really great example. Benders have one specific element outside of the avatar that they can use. and that is pretty much their limit. Their limit is they can only work with the chosen element, and these elements tend to have different interactions that make a lot of sense physically. And also, there's the limitation as well as they need to be well trained. If they don't practice and train and develop their strength, as in like martial arts, they will not be competent fighters. So we see a lot of times characters getting education in bending, characters training really hard, learning how to fight with bending. Um, and if you don't do those kinds of limitations, magic becomes just, like I said in the previous slide, a Deus Ex Machina, where someone can just wave their hand and solve a fight. Which, not to say that that can't be an effective thing occasionally, but you do need to be careful how you use that kind of character who can just solve things with the wave of their hand. I'm thinking a lot of animation examples right now, but if anyone reads Jujutsu Kaisen, there is a character called Gojo, Satoru Gojo, who his whole thing is he pretty much is the strongest character in that series, and he solves most of the fights just pretty simply. But they use that to establish stakes for so when he can't solve something, it becomes much clearer how much more deadly this fight is. Or if he's not able to be there, then the characters have a lot of tension because they know that he won't be there to rescue them. It's a neat little shorthand, but also it's kind of you don't want to use it too much because it becomes clear that anytime he shows up, the fight's going to be solved. I don't want to give manga spoilers, so I'm just talking about the animation right now. And the third law. Oh, did I not include? There it is. Okay, thank you. Oops, went too far ahead. The third law is expand what you already have before you add something new. So my thought here is that whenever you are entering into a fight, this isn't the fight is not the time to pull some new spell, new ability, new magical talent out of your butt. What you should be doing instead is focusing on developing existing abilities for a mage in that they can use a spell in a unique, creative way rather than giving them some sort of new ability. My example here was there's some sort of like an air mage suddenly figuring out how to fly by shooting wind at the ground underneath their feet instead of shooting it at their enemies, or combining their power in conjunction with like a bonfire to create some sort of fire cyclone. These are things that like when the reader reads them, they're not new abilities, they are more extensions of an existing ability. And that is much better than just like pulling out a new like power. It, for example, like in this example here, you're thinking, the air mage has used air to figure out how to deliver fire to their enemy rather than just getting the ability to control fire, which would be a little more boring. They're like, oh, it's like so exciting, you've unlocked a new element. This one is saying, okay, no, you're using your abilities to expand a little bit of your tool set. So creativity is always going to win over just like random new abilities. So that brings us back to the cheese of the fight. And this is where we're going to kind of be retreading some of the old material, but I am going to look at it and talk about things in the context of a magical fight. So first of all, characters. There is no fight without fighters. You will probably have a protagonist in mind, so we can start there. But some questions you should be asking yourself when you get into a fight with characters is, what's the skill level of the character? Are they trained or not? Do they have a lot of natural talent with magic? Do they use spells like crazy? I've been recently watching Frieren a lot, if anyone's seen that, and they do a lot to establish various magical talents before fights happen. Or they use kind of like this like meta narrative where they not meta narrative, but they kind of show you ahead of time how the protagonist might be solving the fight in the same episode. You could be asking yourself questions like, what tactics do they normally employ? What is their personality like in a fight? Um, are they brash and bold, or are they cowardly? These things dictate how they're going to be using their abilities in a fight. And originally, this was talking about physical combat, but in terms of magical combat, you could ask yourself questions like, are they somebody that throws, are they very fiery personality? And do they like to just be in the thick of combat, throwing spells at people? Or are they someone who's much more careful and cautious and to the edge of a battlefield and tries to understand their opponent before engaging? These are kind of good questions that can help you shape that, how they approach a fight and how they engage with it. Uh, Now, you can think about these in terms of their opponent. What traits or skills in an antagonist are going to make this a thrilling fight for readers? Not necessarily just like, oh, they're big and strong, but like, for instance, if you are dealing with, say, your character is cautious and stays at the edge of things, maybe you'd want to write an opponent for them that brings the fight to them, that whose magic is very much about being up close and personal in fights. Someone who throws a lot of like very direct spells or conjure swords, or their magical talent is much more about being in your face. That would make something more interesting because it puts your character, your POV, on the back foot in a fight rather than just having them do the same thing as they usually do. um there's excuse me. um there's a lot you can do with that kind of thing, with contrasting your protagonist and your opponent in a fight. The next thing uh, of the cheese is the environment. And for me, the environment is one that often gets overlooked. And I think it gets overlooked not just in fights, but it gets overlooked a lot in various different contexts. I think we've all gotten the feedback on a piece that someone said, this is just talking heads in a white void, right? Like, you're having a conversation, there's no physicality, there's no setting happening around them, and they're not interacting with anything. They're just dialogue back and forth. The same thing can happen in a fight. People just write an exchange of blows, and they don't think about, especially with wizards, you're going to be dealing with buildings blowing up. You're going to be dealing with fire. You're going to be dealing with magical impact to the environment. For example, I'm thinking about Star Wars here, where people, you always see Darth Vader grabbing random things to throw at people, and that kind of helps you get a little more setting of the physical environment they're in. Or going back to the Wheel of Time, there's scenes where their magic interacts with the very environment to create terrain and hazards. I'm thinking of, there's one specific scene, I think it's book 5 or 6, where they do a spell. A bunch of guys work together to do a spell called Rolling Ring of Fire and Earth, and they just stir up like a bunch of dirt in front of a charging army to kind of sink them into it, and then melt them with fire as they're getting sunken into it. Um, these are the kinds of things that make fights a little more interesting than just like throwing spells at each other. Like, I shoot a fire blast, he shoots a fire blast, I shoot a fire blast, he shoots a fire blast. You want to. It's a lot more fun to see somebody try to like throw a building at someone, or use the environment to their advantage.
Say, can I add a little bit to that?
And you also, yeah, please go ahead.
When you're talking about using the space, especially if you have a relatively limited amount of like powers or skills, utilizing the location is a really great way to make your scenes more dynamic or to create variation between different fights. So when I teach this for the editing class, one of the things I point out is, like specifically what you said, the fireball thing. If you're out in a field, you can
Yeah.
just throw fireballs at each other. But say you put the bad guys in a gymnasium together, like how can you use the weight equipment? Can they actually boil people alive in the pool using fireballs? Are there ways to like modify their behavior, like the person in the fight's behavior, in order to like use that power in like sort of conjunction with what's in that space and to like make the space part of the fight. So I love that you're adding this because it's something that I think people do forget.
Yeah, I think it's definitely one of the areas that I feel like is most overlooked when it comes writing in general. I think it's it's like a weak area because you can get kind of locked in on the flow of like what's actually happening between these two people. Just like you can get locked in on like you're like writing a conversation and you're not paying attention to other people or what else is going on or where they're at. Kind of losing that sensory description. That's a very in a fight. It is very important to keep that in because otherwise, yeah, like you said, it's not very dynamic. The second E of the cheese is emotions, and it's you want to be asking yourself, is there catharsis to this battle? We've been building up to this fight. Is this like a faded battle between rivals? Is this against a villain that we've wanted to see dead for chapters or maybe even books at this point? But not only are emotions about the emotions you're trying to elicit in your reader, they are also we're going to look at the emotions in the characters themselves. Are your characters fighting for their life, or is this less of like more like a sparring? But fighting involves a lot of internal emotions, and you're going to see terror, you're going to see rage, you're going to see desire, you're going to see bravery. And you can ask yourself questions like, is your hero overcoming these or succumbing to them? Are they, in terms of like magical combat, it's not going to be very different from a physical combat. Are they being unmanned by their fear? Are they giving in to rage and just hurling lightning bolts down on their enemy as hard as they can without even thinking about it? Are they going up against a much more competent caster with like they're not sure they can beat? Are they overcoming that fear and being brave, or are they giving into it? Um, what are they? What emotions are the strongest in these characters, and what do they focus on, and what do they think about while they're fighting? And that adds an extra layer to casting spells because it's not just like I'm saying it and I'm doing it. They're thinking, how is this going to help me in this moment? They're thinking, what is that driver inside of them that is making them want to cast this particular spell? You may think, they just always do that, but that's not always the case. Times people seek out new options because of different emotions. I know personally when I was fighting in Muay Thai, if you get like somebody riles you up is a very common thing to happen. And a lot of fighters actually try to do that to their enemies. They kind of like try to like shake their head or say that didn't have any effect on me, which then gets into your opponent's head and makes them try more stupid harebrained things because they just get angry or something like that. And that can happen in a magical fight. I think people have this idea of wizards as being very aloof and kind of non-emotional, but I prefer it when they very much are emotional, where they're making decisions based off of those emotions. So the stakes of the cheese. Every fight needs stakes, and the question of every fight needs stakes is what happens if one side wins or loses. And these are the material, external gain or loss conditions of the fight. Um, you're asking yourself, if the hero loses, do people die? Do they lose access? Do we lose access to something the good guys needed? Is the hero themselves killed? In the Wheel of Time, there is often a consequence of using the one power too much, where they get what they call burnt out, and they can no longer access the power. That is something that could be used as a consequence. Several times, Rand loses a fight and is captured. That's another. At some point, I believe in the series, there is a consequence for casters where they get captured, and what they get stilled, which is they get their access to the power cut out from them. That is something it doesn't. Consequences can be a lot of different things, but especially in magical fights, these consequences can be larger than life. They can be, as far as the world is sucked into a dark spell and the corruption spreads everywhere, if the characters don't stop some sort of ritual or something like that. But when I originally wrote this, I was thinking about people dying to things, or preventing some sort of horrible thing from happening. If you're looking at that in terms of like magical things, you can think about like cultists conjuring their god to come down and smite their enemies, or a wizard activating a crystal that sucks all the souls of the dead away to power their own thing. These are the kinds of stakes that you're probably going to be like looking at when it comes to magical duel. It's not going to be. It's going to usually be a little more complicated than someone dies. There's going to be a little extra oomph to it that is magical. And finally, the last of the cheese is the economics of a fight. A fight needs to have economics, and this is more so the internal gain and loss that happens inside of someone, regardless of the external outcome. A fight should change a character and a story permanently. We're talking, even if the stakes are low and victory is certain, this kind of thing should mark the protagonist or cost them something. And again, this is not unique to magical duels, but it could be. For instance, I have Dune down there, but it could be that, as we mentioned with the creative side earlier, that the protagonist learns a new way to use their magic, learns like a neat creative idea that gets them over it, and then they start using that from then on. It kind of becomes their new thing. Um, or they could, as I said, if they have their magic cut out from them, what does that mean now? What happens now to them? What are they going to do with that loss? And what are they going to think about as this fight resolves and goes forward? They're going to think maybe it is just like a little light thing, and even though they lose, they have the ability to keep going. What lessons are they going to take from their loss? What growth are they going to undergo because of winning or losing a fight, or even embarking on the fight in the first place? um, I've been trying to avoid talking about Harry Potter too much, because it is like, I think, like one of the easier series to touch on for this kind of thing. There's magical duels all around, and every time there is some sort of, I feel there is a cost on the soul of the people that engage in these battles. But honestly, Harry Potter is not my forte. I haven't read it in a very long time. But there is this kind of idea about like dark magic, like leaving a stain on people that use it. The killing spells are really thought of as something that forever marks the person that used it, not just the person that died from it. Um, but I think there are a lot of series out there that you can point to and look at how various um, how people come out of a fight. The Wheel of Time does it a lot, where they'll learn new weaves, which is what they call spells, or they'll take some sort of lesson away from these life or death situations. And in terms of magical things, that's going to kind of shape how they use magic going forward or how they view it. Some people might think of magic now like getting into it, they're like, oh yeah, this is the best thing ever. They get into a life and death fight. Suddenly this person is thinking, man, magic is scary. Magic is lethal. I don't know how much I want to actually use this. Um, there's at the I'm going to spoil Jade City if anyone's read that, but at the end there is a very strong magical duel where a character uses magic to its lethal potential, and after that decides I want nothing to do with this anymore. That is, for me, is the economics of a magical fight. So I want to talk a little bit about craft when it comes to magic, and this is going to be pretty much identical to what I talked to about last time. But for me, the craft of a fight is pretty important, and it helps you not lose a reader when you get into a fight. You never want to go into a fight and have your reader be like, "Oh, another combat." Okay, you want them to be excited. This should be like something that's about to change the story. So for things with craft, you definitely don't. You want to show, don't tell, and I hate that advice because I feel like it's extremely reductive. But in terms of writing combat, what that means to me is don't let your point of view character become a reporter if they're involved in the fight. You don't want to be thinking, or you don't want to be writing like, I watched them step forward. He attacked me. I danced backwards. He fell into a blow, but he didn't fall up. I stepped forward again and slashed. He struck me on the shoulder. There's no like, it's like a little, it's just like things happening rather than back and forth. It's entirely mechanical, focused on choreography. There's no reaction. There's no emotion. There's no internal narration. You're not in the fight. You're just watching the fight. Um, some writers do employ a third party POV to give a better account of the actual action, as well as the emotions. It depends on the goal of the scene. For example, like I brought up Dune a couple times in this presentation, but Paul and James's knife fight, much of it's told through his mother's perspective, and she lends her own understanding and emotions to the scene. I don't know why I misspelled it that way. But you definitely want to think about keeping your voice. You don't want to lose your narrative tone just because people start swinging or shooting guns. You ask yourself, how has your protagonist narrated previously? How do they think and act normally? These don't go away in a fight in a book. You want to keep these threads going. Um, Action and reaction, these kind of back and forth beats. When one fighter acts, the other must do something. When someone punches you, you don't just take it. You block it, you defend, you parry. Um, there has to be this kind of, it can't just be someone's just doing a bunch of stuff and the other person is just letting it happen. That is not how a realistic fight goes. And if that is how the fight goes, the fight's going to be over very quickly, if you just let somebody piece you up, basically. But there is this kind of idea that you need to be thinking of, in each move both fighters are doing something, not just one fighter doing something, if that makes sense. I like to think about fights in terms of like beats. In terms of like a music, if you're thinking 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, oftentimes music does not move that way. Usually, music moves more with an emphasis on different beats. They may be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, something like that, or maybe even going offbeat, where someone's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. These kinds of beats can. I think of writing fight scenes sometimes in that way, using different beats, different kind of like there's an emphasis here, and then they step back and things are quiet and they're feeling each other out, and then bam, they hit each other again. Um, you know, and it also in terms of just the sentence structure, find the balance between too much and too little in a sentence. Have some sentences to be really snappy, and then some sentences you give a pause to like let them breathe. And this is also again ditto on the paragraph level. Generally, it's better not to linger too long on one beat of the fight or put too many beats of a fight into one paragraph. Like a good song, I feel there should be movement. A battle should rise and fall. There should be kind of an introduction and then kind of a sitting in it, the regular verse, and then the chorus, aiming for that last deciding bout. I view things very musically sometimes, and I think that that can help with combat a lot. So I want people to think about their favorite magical fight. And I want you to think about these factors that we talked about. Do you see what I'm talking about in those fights? Do you see the cheese that I'm talking about? And if so, maybe you can think about how that applies to your own fights and how that might be useful. Yeah, Shannon.
Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt too much, but one of the things that I wanted to kind of add that I really like about you talking about the music and the beats is that when you slow down how you write and think about things like that, you do a much better job with the blocking because you know the starting point of that character, and that really helps make sure that your the logistics of the action makes sense. That the person isn't starting off, like raising, a sword over their hand when they've been on the ground, in a hand-to-hand combat, but now all of a sudden they're up and they're moving, right? Like, so if you start to think about those things as beats, as movement, as flow, and you actually do the choreography that way, you're much less likely to, again, do something that the reader is going to see and be like, well, that's bonkers.
Yeah, yeah. You definitely don't want some people thinking something is bonkers. That's you don't want to lose. I mean, unless you're like directly trying to like do satire or something funny, but generally, if you're writing this way, you're not writing comedy. You're writing like actual serious story. You want to be thinking about that kind of blocking and that how things are moving. And Randy, you just asked a great question. Do you recommend drawing an action scene storyboard for your own visual reference? Uh, I've never I can't say I've never done that. I think I probably have done like a couple of pieces of that. So if you ever like, you want to take like some stick figures and like, just kind of figure out how things are going to move, I think that could be very, very useful. I've probably done that once or twice about things that were more complicated. I don't know if I do it so much lately, but that's usually because I generally I've done it enough that like I have like, when I go to set out a combat scene, I generally have like a flow I already know in my head. But, if you're feeling less certain about it, definitely storyboarding it out could be a good idea.
Especially if it's magical combat and each motion or rune or whatever it is they're casting
Yeah.
has an impact on the other person in the battle or in the immediate surrounding, then I think it actually is really useful to do the visual because it reminds you, oh, these things have changed.
Yeah.
Like especially if your magic has really specific rules about like position or body movements for casting, it'll allow you to say like, oh, well, crap, I accidentally cut their hand off and they need that hand. Maybe I need to go back and change the injury so I can get it done the right way or within the boundaries of the magic I've created.
Yeah. Definitely that. I'm thinking of like if anyone saw the D&D movie that came out a little while ago, that final fight they have with the red wizard lady is very well choreographed according both to D&D's rules and also just like thinking about how their fights often impact the environment. They get a statue involved. People are trying to hide around buildings or getting dragged through the streets in the fight. It's very very environment conscious fight, and I really like it. So if you're ever thinking about that, definitely go and watch that. Um, I know I tend to do a lot of like visual references, especially in my presentations, because it is easier to visualize than just writing. And using those visualizations can definitely help in the writing process. Excuse me. Renee is asking about a link to slides to print out. I don't think we've done that before, have we, Shannon?
It's been a really long time. We had a Google Drive where we were keeping stuff, but we haven't been maintaining it. So, Renee, I can definitely send them over to you directly. I think we're on LinkedIn together, if Ian is willing
Yeah,
to let me have
I'd
it.
appreciate it because I just couldn't take notes and I wanted to take notes because there was
Sure,
such great stuff.
sure, sure, sure.
If Ian and I like come to if he prefers not to do that, we will still have this presentation on Substack. So I will send it to you. It might take me a week to get it up or two, but this will be available for you to review. But I'm pretty sure Ian is going to be okay with sending PowerPoints out.
That's fine. Yeah, I'll PDF it. That is pretty much all I have. I know I kind of blew through time pretty quickly. Actually, I thought I'd take a little longer with how dense these slides were. But if anyone has any other questions or final thoughts, the floor is open.
Do you want to talk a little bit about soft magic systems too? You talked pretty in depth about hard magic, but are the
Yeah.
rules a little bit different for your combat for soft magic?
Well, so that's kind of a hard point to talk about because, it's not impossible, but soft magic is a little harder to utilize in those kinds of fights. And I'm thinking here about like Lord of the Rings, where like Gandalf, more I'm thinking about the Hobbit, right? Where like Gandalf is not a character we get to experience like inside his head. We don't know what magic looks like for him. We just know he shows up and he solves problems. Um, and the tension is usually not will Gandalf win? It's usually more in like, can Bilbo survive until Gandalf shows up to help? That's usually where the tension is. The reason I cited a lot of hard magic systems is because when it comes to combat, um, an understanding of the rules of the magic system is much better for combat than say soft magic, where like soft magic, if I was going to use it in a fight scene, I would kind of rely on the idea of soft
I'm gonna
magic
make
can
you
only
back up because
mess
I
things
asked you
up.
the question, but we haven't actually defined soft magic.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so soft magic, as opposed to hard magic. Hard magic has a lot of rules, has well defined what it can do and what it can't do is very well defined on the page, and the reader understands it. There are strong rules to what it can and can't do. There are strong costs to what it takes to cast a spell. And so the understanding of this magic system is very high for the reader. We know how it can be used. Soft magic system is a little less defined. It's typically more mysterious. Magic is more mysterious. Magic is more inspires awe and invokes like feelings of wonder. And it's more about like the aesthetic, the effect it has on the characters and the world, rather than can it be controlled and used. And so the reason I say that it is harder to use that in a fight is because, well, if you have like a spell that just kills people, you just cast willy nilly, or like there's like something that a character can do, they just show up and they go, that's it. Well, that's kind of hard to make into an interesting fight, unless, and I'll say this, where I would rather use soft magic in a fight is I would rather it be like an environmental hazard. I would rather it be like, there's this like magical blight that affects people. They can't control it. It's just kind of there. There's no understanding what it does. All they know is that it corrupts things and it kills people. That's more interesting to use in a fight in terms of like if I were going to let a protagonist use it, I would have them like trick somebody into going into the blight or something like that, and like just jumping into it on accident or whatever, or have it be present in the fight and your protagonist is like trying to avoid it, trying to be like, okay, I can't go over there because that's where that is. That's more how I would see soft magic being used in a fight. But I'm totally that's just one guy's opinion. So.
So since we do have a few more minutes and I'm going to bug you, but if anybody else has questions, go by all means, bring them up. Since you edit and you also write and you've gone through that process from both sides, what are the most common problems you see with how people write their magical combat? And I would say like one or two, maybe three if we have time. And do you have a frame of reference for how to get better at those things?
Yeah. Well, definitely what I just talked about. One, not understanding, or like pulling up new ideas, new abilities out of nowhere is definitely one. Not defining the magic system. Like maybe you have like these like rules in your head, like that for sure, but it's not translated onto the page. I see that quite a bit, and I've done that quite a bit, especially as an earlier writer, where would like I wrote down somewhere on like a piece of paper what everything did, and then I didn't explain it in the story, and so the reader has no idea that magic can do that. Another thing that I would probably think of as seeing a lot is people doing the whole void, right? Not incorporating the environment, not incorporating any physicality or material elements into their fight scene, just having it be like pure white void back and forth. This is something I see a lot of in like Marvel. Their final fights tend to be just kind of like especially I remember this in the Scarlet Witch fights where it's just kind of like they're just kind of like and doing that at each other over and over again, and there's not like a ton of a lot. There's a lot of ass pulls, and there's not really like a lot of like interesting things happening outside of them just like looking at each other, and I think that's a pretty superhero thing to do. But yeah, actually, I can think of. I love the Guardians of the Galaxy, but they do totally do that at the end, where they're all just like standing with each other in like an ominous cloud of smoke, looking at the guy, and like it's like just who can control the power more. And it's fun because like they all grab each other's hands, and it's about the power of friendship. But like there is really no environment to that fight. It just is like solidly like standing there and like shaking. So that those are probably like two of the things I see a lot. And if you can even see it in a Marvel movie that is making millions of dollars, it's like it's pretty it's going to show up in writing a lot.
I'm gonna add one more thing to your list.
Yeah, go
And this is, I guess this is cheating a little bit, but one of the things that I do note a lot is that the battle is over and everything goes back to normal.
for it.
But most of the time with magic, there should be long-term debilitating effects either on the main characters or the people who are in like the general vicinity who are impacted by the destruction, or who had magic like hit them, and so they've been transmogrified or what have you, or burned or whatever it is. So, having a realistic set of consequences for whatever magic was cast on both the characters and the setting, I think is something that authors tend to forget.
Yeah, no, I agree for sure.
I apologize. My toddler wants to talk about this too, but none of this is magic.
But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. From I that I can't really. I think we've kind of covered a lot of stuff, so I can't think of anything else to talk about at this point. Um, but thanks y'all for coming and listening to me rant at you about fighting scenes and magic and whatnot. I hope y'all had fun.
Thank you,
Thank you so
Ian.
much, Ian.
Next week we're doing romantic tension with Daphne, right?
That is
Yes.
correct. And as I said, if you follow us on our Substack or if you follow us under Tomeworks on YouTube, you will be able to see both the live streams and the edited version. At least for now, we may be doing away with the live streams there in the future. But we do have a repository of education in both of those spaces. And if you did sign up via Eventbrite, I will be sending you links to the video when we're done editing it. So find us in those spaces. I will also, be sending this out again, probably in a couple of weeks. So hopefully you won't miss it. Thank you, Ian.
All right, y'all. Thank y'all. Appreciate